I'm going to be reviewing these three machines. To the left we have the Bishop Wand Packer, which is retailed at about $750 to $800 depending on where and whom you're buying it from. In the middle we have the masked Flex machine. This machine retailed just about over $100. And then over here on the right we have the masked Rider Pro. This machine is retailed at $200. All three machines have a 4mm stroke, though I will note the Bishop Wand has a 4.2mm stroke, so just about 0.2mm longer than the average 4. Now, as far as the spec of RPM for each machine, I am not certain. I know that they are all different based off the feel that I get from each of them, but I can say from my experience that the Masked Rider and the Bishop Wand have similar RPM, and it feels as though the Flex has the lowest RPM of the three, but I'll get into that later. As far as setting up each machine, it's all pretty easy but very different. For the Wand Packer, I like its design and how the handle comes over that part, so you can really just cover one half and then wrap the other half after you tie it back on, as you saw me do. For the Rider Pro, the machine to the right, you really had to cover the top and bottom in plastic because it has the buttons to turn it on and off at the top that you want to protect. So you just kind of have to wrap the tops in plastic and then use grip tape to cover each side, which was pretty cool. I felt like it was really easy to set up. And now for the Flex, the handle snaps when you twist it, which I do like, but the handle is very long and covers the majority of the machine itself. And so what I had to do was cover it in a tube, so that way I didn't have to wrap the machine in 3 different compartments, from the handle, the rest of the body, and then the battery pack itself. So that's one thing I didn't like about that. Now for the first example, I'm going to be doing a couple of lines with each machine on 6 volts and just see how they compare to each other. Now when you initially get a machine, it may be hard to tell the difference in the feeling, especially if you're newer, but also you may ask why some machines cost a lot more. And the answer to that could as well be branding, of course, but I think a big one is also longevity. So I haven't had these other machines very long, but I have had the Bishop Wand Packer for, I believe, almost 2 years now, and it's been just as consistent since I've had it. And so with cheaper machines, you may not find this to be the case. They may break earlier, or they start to lose their strength, or you may have other problems with them. I don't know about these machines yet, so I could do an extended review on them, but for now I will share my initial thoughts on these machines. So the Wand Packer is great at pulling lines. I feel like it's very well balanced, not too powerful, not too light. I don't need to apply a lot of hand weight, and for the voltage that I would prefer to work at, I think it does a great job. Now with the Flex, you could really feel the lower RPM here when you're pulling the lines. I like how it felt a lot. It felt like due to the lower RPM, I could feel a lot more feedback. So when it's hitting the skin less times per second, I have a chance to feel the impact more, because if it's a higher RPM, that's quicker, that is impacting the skin again, and less time for me to be able to respond to the input I'm getting. So that's probably why I liked the Flex for pulling lines. Now as far as the Rider Pro, I felt like it did a great job too. I pulled 2 lines for each one just as a warm-up, and did a second one after my initial thoughts of the machine. And it's really just about adjusting, honestly. They all did an excellent job at pulling lines. Now personally here with the Bishop Wand Packer, I feel like it stood out the most with this stipple shading here, because it is an extremely consistent machine, and so that allows me to create the same dots every time when I hit the skin, versus a machine that isn't quite as refined. You're not going to have that same level of precision per se, and it's really going to take you a lot of years to really feel that difference, or a lot of experience with different machines to really feel that. So that just might be a personal preference that I feel, and I also have been using this machine for a long time, so that might be a bias for me as well. The next thing I'm doing is shading with each machine on the same voltage, just to see the difference in how it impacts the practice skin. So again, here I am running at 6 volts because that is my preference. Sometimes I may run my voltage even lower than that, but this is the best voltage I like for the style that I shade in. So really this test here is just about consistency and how easy it is for me to get a smooth layer of even tone shading. And from there, once I see a certain result, then I'm going to move over to seeing how easy it is to get a transition from dark to light with the same machine and voltage. For the flex, I felt like it was a bit difficult to get smoother or even consistency as far as dragging my needle across the skin, as you'll see it right here. But as far as the other two, they felt fairly comparable. Now I know 6 volts is on the lower end of the voltage spectrum, so later on here I'm going to up the voltage just to show you guys how these machines perform for me with the higher voltage. Now I already did my transition test with the Bishop Wand Packer, and this is why I like this machine so much, is because it does a great job at that. It may be also due to the fact that the stroke length is just a tad bit longer than the other machines, so it gives me a little bit more room for my hand motion to swing back and forth, so I get more of a range. As opposed to a shorter stroke, I might have less range to use that pendulum shading swing that I talk about in my other videos. Now, I could be wrong because this is just all me theorizing how exactly each machine feels different and why, but as far as personal preference, I like using pendulum shading with longer stroke machines. So all these machines are doing a good job for their stroke range, but again, I will say the Mass Flex did a good job, but it was just the hardest to get a smooth transition with. For the shading, for me, the Bishop Wand Packer and the Rider Pro felt very similar. The only difference is that I felt like the Rider Pro just hit a little bit softer. Now, as far as for the Flex, I felt like it punches things in just kind of hard almost. It's weird. It's not like it's a hard hit, but it's just really efficient, I feel like, at packing. Maybe just because of, in accordance with my hand motion, it was just easier, but I found it much easier to saturate, which could be a good or bad thing, because I like to work in layers. I probably wouldn't prefer that, but if you're someone who uses like color a lot or likes darker tattoos, this might be very useful to you. So next, what I'll be doing here is packing in black with all 3 machines and seeing the difference, if there is any, and what are the feedback differences. So I'll let you guys watch and see how each machine responds to how I pack in black, which I tend to kind of go in a circular or back and forth motion and do it in a layer, but I do apply more pressure than I usually do. That way I can make sure the needle is maintaining the same depth the entire time while I'm packing in that black. Feedback for each machine was quite different for this, but I'd say the result is similar. So for something like this, is really just based off artist experience rather than the machine itself. So obviously you want the best equipment possible when you're tattooing. You're trying to do your best work, but it's not all about the machine, rather it's about the artist experience. So practice with different machines, find out what works best for you. But with that being said, all 3 machines do an excellent job at packing black. So what I'm going to be doing here is the same thing I did so far in the video, but on a higher voltage. I like to work on 6 volts, but I'm cranking all these machines to 8 volts and seeing how they compare in their performance. So we're going to do the shading test first. I'm going to do a even tone pass, then I will do a transition test right after on each skin. Then I will be pulling lines with each machine on the higher voltage. After we're done doing that, I'm going to test each machine and how they feel on actual skin. So funny enough, I didn't like the Bishop wand packer at all for shading at 8 volts. As you can see, my shading was kind of choppy for the packer, but for the flex, I actually feel like the shading was the best at 8 volts. It's also the quietest machine too, so that is also another pro. But at 8 volts, the flex really did shine there. The Rider Pro did a good job at 8 volts. I like how it felt as well, but I personally just didn't like how the Bishop felt at 8 volts. I like it on a slower voltage, but these other two machines did a great job shading on the higher voltage. I will say though that for line work, the Bishop wand packer at 8 volts was very excellent. Like, that was a crispy line. I didn't have to go over it again. It felt like it was packed in smooth. But for the Rider Pro, I felt like it didn't really do well, which is why I pulled 2 lines just to see if it was me or the machine. But I felt like the machine didn't do well with lining on a higher voltage. So now what I want to show you guys here is the response in the machines on actual skin. So I'm using my own knee here to shade these parts in, and I'll let you guys look at it and see what differences you may notice. Also note that I put all the machine's voltage here at 7 volts. So on actual skin, it was a little harder to feel the difference, maybe due to the pain, because each one did sting a little bit different. But as far as the result, it was all very similar, except for, I will say, the flex was still easier to punch in the blacks and saturate it a little bit more than I wanted to, so that was a constant with that. But as far as shading with these 3 machines, I feel like it was very similar feeling and feedback when on actual skin. I will leave links to all the machines down in the description. If you decide to purchase any of the masked machines, you can use my promo code QINKS10 for 10% off. So I appreciate you guys all for watching. See you guys in the next video.